Hello and welcome to a Wednesday, live right here on the morning after on Sports Grid and Sirius XM channel 159. That's the home for Sports Grid Radio on Sirius XM, all across the Sports Grid network as well. I am Ben Stevens, and from the very jump of this Wednesday TMA, live all across the grid, Joe Raineri joins us as well because it was a New York Minute yesterday. And although I am in New York, Joe Raineri used to live here in the greater New York City area. He knows the pulse of this city. And for most of Wednesday, JR, or at least as we start off Wednesday and even on a Tuesday afternoon, it was New York City in the headlines, both in Brooklyn because of the NBA and, of course, a Subway Series in Major League Baseball between two of the four best teams, the Yankees and the Mets. So that's where we start in New York with our focus.
Listen, I got to tell you, I was a little worried there about this Yankees team. I was a little bit worried that now I'm a little bit worried about the Mets team, given what we've seen from Atlanta. But it appears, and I don't want to step out here, but it does appear that the Yankees remembered how to hit with runners in scoring position. So far, so good. It only took the New York Mets to snap the Yankees out of their funk right now. And what is up with DeGrom? So many questions here, Ben. So many unanswered.
Because last night it was the Yankees against Taijuan Walker getting the start for the Mets, and Jacob DeGrom expected to start later this week for New York. We'll get to the Subway Series and the Yankees pulling off the sweep in the Bronx in just a little bit. But from the Bronx to Brooklyn we go, where Kevin Durant will stay for the upcoming 2022-23 NBA season. Joe Raineri, nearly 2 months ago, on Thursday, June 30th, Kevin Durant sent shockwaves through the basketball and sports world at large with his trade request from the Brooklyn Nets. But as we got reporting yesterday from the Athletic and Stadium Shams Charania, Kevin Durant met with Joe Tsai, the Brooklyn Nets owner, Steve Nash, and GM Sean Marks, and reiterated his commitment to the Brooklyn Nets. They have agreed on a partnership moving forward. Pretty much that trade request is no more. KD has pulled it. Kevin Durant will stay with Brooklyn for this upcoming season. Joe, let me read you the statement that Brooklyn itself as an organization put out yesterday because it was interesting in its entirety. It is from General Manager Sean Marks, and it says, quote, Steve Nash and I, together with Joe Tsai and Carl Wu Tsai, met with Kevin Durant and his agent, Rich Kleiman, in Los Angeles yesterday. We have agreed to move forward with our partnership. We are focusing on basketball with one collective goal in mind, build a lasting franchise to bring a championship to Brooklyn. A couple of things stand out to me, JR. We have agreed to move forward with our partnership. We are focusing on basketball. Pretty much saying, we don't really like Kevin Durant. He doesn't really like us, but we're pretty good what we can do in the basketball arena. So let's go try to win a title, I guess.
I'm just shocked that a NBA ownership group would focus on basketball. I mean, talk about saying absolutely nothing, Ben. Are you kidding me? And here's another thing. Let's be realistic. We've got a few more months between now and the start of the NBA season, right? This is not the end of this. I can assure you of that. Between now and then, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, there's going to be something about Ben Simmons. There is going to be more upheaval before it's all said and done. This is not hold hands and kumbaya, Ben. It is far from over yet, my friend.
I still think there is drama in Brooklyn to be had with that cast and crew. Welcome to our Sports Grid Radio audience here, the opening hour of a Wednesday live on the morning after, all across Sports Grid, Sirius XM, channel 159, all of our terrestrial radio affiliates now in the mix as well. He is Joe Raineri, I am Ben Stevens, and Kevin Durant is staying in Brooklyn after a summer of drama, a full offseason that felt like the National Basketball Association, as we knew it, would change all around Kevin Durant. The only thing that changed yesterday was the price on the Brooklyn Nets to win an Eastern Conference crown in an NBA championship. Because, JR, we saw tons of market movement immediately following that statement from the Nets organization. Their odds to win the title slashed by more than half, 15-1 yesterday. Now the third best price at plus 700. Their odds to win the East as of late July when it seemed like KD might be somewhere else. 7-1, now plus 370, and even on this morning, 20 cents shorter to plus 350. Where do you think this leaves the Brooklyn Nets, Joe?
Well, it leaves me believing that both of those situations and both of those prices, Ben, actually pay the same, which is squat, because they ain't winning a damn thing, Ben Stevens. 3-1, 13-1, 15-1. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference here. The Brooklyn Nets, with Kevin Durant currently constructed the way it is, with drama on the way, it ain't happen. It pays the same to me. I don't care what number you get at.
And as we remember from last year, the Brooklyn Nets were a short preseason favorite to win the Eastern Conference and the NBA championship. And the Brooklyn Nets, with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, were swept in the opening round by the Boston Celtics. But Ben Simmons is back. Joe Harris might be back. We'll have more from around Brooklyn and what the outlook is for the Nets moving forward next season. But right now we're in the home stretch of Major League Baseball. The hunt for October, and it's centered around New York yesterday. More from the Subway Series and around MLB up next here on The Morning After.
Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
They play less games.
The early line.
Take a look at the top 4 seeds here in the Big Ten. They're going to play less
Rodgers
games.
and
the morning
Russell
after.
Wilson. We saw movement in the marketplace like
Orlando
Fantasy
Magic.
sports
The Cleveland
today.
Cavaliers are a little thin as well.
Newswire.
Minus 160 favorite on the money line today for Arizona.
Pharrell coast to coast.
That's where they win cups. They win Stanley Cups over there. Give me the
Game
Penguins.
time
Kind of
decisions.
bizarre when you consider like everybody is out for the Warriors.
In-game live
I
all
like
access.
I like Vandy against Bama. I think Vandy can win the game, take it 4.5.
In-game live, prime time.
The PGA champion.
In-game live, overtime.
done before the final bet.
Get the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid. The morning after.
Baker Mayfield, the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Now, Kev, we know that week 1 opener for the Panthers is against Baker's former team. What do you make of the storylines for Baker Mayfield entering that week 1 opener as the starter in Carolina?
You know, Baker is such a storyline guy, right? Such a narrative guy. It couldn't have been anybody other.
The Sports Grid Network. The early line.
This non-story is officially over. Tom Brady went away. Why? Because he can. He's Tom Brady. His wife very publicly has wanted him to retire. He did, and then he unretired. So in a meaningless week of practice, he went out and was able to spend some time with his family. Make sure that everything is good. It was reported to be a work-life balance. It was reported that the Bucs knew it was coming.
Only on Sports Grid.
Sports Fest Rick Harrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports with your daily numbers game. All the hoopla and conversation about Kansas. When does betting really start? What is the regulation going to be? What about the casinos? Well, certain casinos head start September 1, says the governor. The lion's share of the betting under other existing casinos, September 8. What a surprise. The kickoff of the NFL season that same night. Indian gaming casino operations will have a chance to align with Kansas as well to maximize the revenue sooner than later. Got 3 weeks, they'll get it done. And the bottom line for Kansas, as well as Missouri, the first bet that could be placed legally on the Chiefs, September 11 game, legally in Kansas. They waited, but not too late. Sports Fest and Rick Harrow, Daily Numbers Game.
Around Major League Baseball we go in the Diamond Dash. The playoff picture starting to solidify across Major League Baseball. And we start with a Subway Series that went the way of the Yankees. Welcome back to the Morning After, live right here on a Wednesday. He is Joe Raineri. I am Ben Stevens. And for the same exact 3 days, Joe, the Yankees have won 3 straight games, dating back to the series finale against the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's been by the exact same final score. 4-2. The Yankees beat the Mets 4-2 on Monday inside Yankee Stadium, and that was the same last night on a Tuesday. So the Yankees sweep the Subway Series. There was a market available for the series winner prior to Game 1. The Yankees were the underdog at plus 320. Congrats if you cashed that ticket. Both games go under a total. The Pinstripes have gone under in 10 of their last 11. But, Joe, entering this Subway Series, and I think this is the bigger point, it felt like the Yanks were reeling. They had still only won 4 games in their last 18. They pull off a sweep over the New York Mets, a certain contender for the National League and a World Series appearance. Has this changed your outlook for New York, that being the Yankees in this case, the rest of the way?
So we knew, Ben, and we talked about this prior to the All-Star break, that at some point this season, it could not continue to go, all the breaks go towards the Yankees, right? All of these one-run games, these walk-off games, which is great, but at some point, injuries were going to hit. There was going to be a slide at some point in the season, and I think we reached it. I think after the All-Star break, here we are. The Yankees were not, they didn't look anything like the team we saw in the first half. Now, having said that, this is a game of, it's a lot of ups and downs here. It's an emotional roller coaster, a long 162-game season. The great thing that we saw this weekend is we started to see Judge back in form. We know that Stanton is on his way back. He'll be ready to go Thursday. And more importantly, Frankie Montas pitched the best as that we have seen yet last night as a Yankee. So we can all breathe a little sigh of relief here. I think they've righted the ship a little bit. They'll get Stanton back, and the pitching, well, we still got some question marks in that bullpen, unfortunately, but collectively, they're still in a great spot. They weathered the storm, I feel here, Ben. They're still in a great spot to win the East and contend for a world championship.
Aaron Judge, a home run in back-to-back games, both against the Mets in that Subway Series. He has 48 now this year. Frankie Montas, who combined for 14 earned runs allowed in his first 3 starts in Pinstripes. Last night, only 2 given up to the Mets. And the Yankees maintain an 8-game lead in the American League East. The Mets' lead in the NL East is down to just 2 games because the Atlanta Braves have won 13 of their last 15. So a very different picture. We showed you the World Series odds. The Mets back by 50 cents. The Yankees $1.50 in front of them. The third best price at plus 450. All right, let's go around Major League Baseball now, Joe Raineri, because yesterday we had a matchup in Baltimore between 2 teams trying to claw their way back into that playoff picture. And the Orioles aren't necessarily out of it yet because they do what seemed impossible just about 2 months ago. They scratched across runs against Dylan Cease. But now Dylan Cease has given up 7 earned in his last 2 starts, and that was following a 14-start streak of allowing only 1 earned run or less. The Orioles win yesterday 5-3. Can Baltimore actually do it, Joe Raineri? They're 2.5 games out right now.
Yes, they lost Chicago, but it was worse than that given the fact of how Dylan Cease got lit up early. But, they out-hit Baltimore 5-3. They were 2 for 13 with runners in scoring position last night. That's not going to get it done down the stretch. Like, you can't afford those kinds of games where everybody goes MIA when you have a chance to bury a team like the Orioles. And the Orioles, in typical fashion here, Ben, started as a dog, on the run line, on the money line, and voila, we're cashing tickets. And the other great thing about the Orioles last night, something I haven't seen, it feels like, in decades, Batista came in for a 5-out save. 5 outs! They brought him to get the final 2 outs in the 8th, and then he came in and got the final 3 outs of the game, and voila, look at that. A little bit of old school, get it done, and the White Sox, that Central Division is a hot mess, but do not sleep on the Baltimore Orioles, Ben. How many more times do we have to say that?
The O's have been booked as an underdog in 103 of their 122 games. They are 50-53 straight up as an underdog. We know that underdogs get plus money prices. They have been incredibly profitable this year, but the American League wildcard race is seeming to solidify just a little bit right now in those standings. The Rays have won 4 straight games. They have a half-game lead over both the Blue Jays and the Mariners for that top spot in the American League wildcard. The M's and the Blue Jays tied for those final 2 spots, both 2.5 games in front of those Baltimore Orioles and 4 games in front of the Minnesota Twins. The Blue Jays, the best odds to win the American League pennant out of this wild card contending group. Toronto is 7-1, but there is a far drop-off from where the Yankees are at plus 210 with the second best price in the American League than where Toronto finds themselves in third. The American League pennant favorites, by the way, the Houston Astros, had another gem from 39-year-old Justin Verlander yesterday. He has 6 innings of no-hit baseball. He's pooled. He was okay with it, focusing more on the postseason. And Verlander now a minus 260. Heavy odds-on favorite, Joe, to win the American League Cy Young because of Dylan Cease coming back down to earth a little bit, and because Verlander wins his Major League Baseball best, or tied for Major League Baseball best, 16 wins yesterday, his 16th win of the year. He has the best ERA in baseball at 1.87. His 18th year, JR, in Major League Baseball, and this is what Justin Verlander is still giving us.
6 innings. I mean, what a stat line, Ben. 6 innings, no runs, no hit, gave up no hits, didn't walk anybody, but he K'd 10 in a 91 pitch performance. And, when you're up by 322 games, at this point in the season, there's really no need to keep pushing him to try to get a no-no. Right. Like, that's just not going to happen. Bigger picture here. And the reality is the Astros continue to win games in impressive fashion. And outside of Verlander, that pitching staff has been phenomenal this year, Ben, but not a lot of big names outside of Verlander. So they're doing it. They're doing it as a team. They're hitting unbelievably right now. We should start getting used to the Astros are not going anywhere anytime soon, guys. Great organization, well run, and here we go again, poised to make another run for it. So everybody needs a villain. It don't look like it's going to be the Yankees. It's going to be the Houston Astros again this year.
The Stros were a minus 320 favorite with Verlander on the bump. They cashed that. The Twins, who was their opponent yesterday, lose their 4th straight game. The Cleveland Guardians now hold a 3-game lead in the American League Central. Cleveland entered yesterday minus 105 to win the division, minus 160 this morning on the FanDuel Sportsbook. The Guardians on the road win as an underdog in San Diego, 3-1. Joe, you mentioned Houston started to hit. Well, the Dodgers were shut out for the first time at home all year long on Monday. LA said enough of that. We're going to put up 10 runs, including 7 of them against the reigning NL Cy Young winner in Corbin Burns. Both Frederick Freeman and Trey Turner yesterday, 3 of 5 at the dish. Freeman, 4 ribbies. Turner, 2 ribbies. Freddie Freeman has 154 hits this year. That's the most in Major League Baseball. Trey Turner has the second most hits. He has 153. And oh yeah, Tony Gonsolin, the Catman himself, 16-1 this year. A 2.10 ERA, the second best in Major League Baseball. Those 16 wins, tied at the top with Justin Verlander. All right. 3 days away from the start of the college football season, it's college football playoff talk with Joe Raineri up next.
Your heart's racing. The clock's running out. It all comes down to this. We're talking pregame. 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 Get locked in with Game Time Decisions. Your hosts, Gabe Moritzi and Cam Stewart, will get you ready for game time. Everything you need to know before a game goes off the board, with the bet slips to back it up. Make your best bet with live odds updates, late breaking news, up-to-the-minute injury reports, and real-time analytics from inside the sports books. All the odds, all the action, from sports wagering insiders and industry pros like Donnie Rightside, Cam Lou, Cousin Sal, the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, and more. Get the winning edge every weekday afternoon from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 4 Pacific. It's Game Time Decisions. Only on Sports Grid.
You might be the next daily fantasy millionaire. No matter what you watch or where you play, learn from the world's best DFS players. Lineup building tools, expert projections, and advanced stats change the way you play the game. Dominate the competition. DailyRoto.com, the player's choice.
The morning after.
What was your reaction to the Yankees taking Game 1 of the Subway Series last night, even up against Max Scherzer?
You know, let's work backwards. Started with Jonathan Loaizaga. They need to kind of piece together the closer situation. That was the thing that struck me. Of course, we can talk about Aaron Judge and, homer number 47 and all that cool stuff, but I want to talk about the setup guy that was having a down year that might turn into the closer down the stretch, because that's what, baseball is, right? It's all about the boring stuff.
The Sports Grid Network. Fantasy Sports Today.
Michael Pittman did put together somewhat of an impressive season. He ended up being wide receiver 13 in fantasy. I guess what owners are hoping for based on his positional rank going into this year is that he just is a little bit more consistent, and honestly where he's being drafted, giving you about 15 to 20% more numbers, about 1,200 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns.
The Sports Grid Network. The early line.
They sent out a Jordan Montgomery, who evidently is the best pitcher in baseball. I know it's the Cubs. I don't care. A complete game one-hitter.
And how about this, too? On the road in Chicago at Wrigley against one of your hated rivals here. Now, we know the Chicago Cubs aren't having a great season by any stretch at 52-69, but isn't these are the type of wins that you need?
Only on Sports Grid.
Three days away from the start of the 2022 college football season, and a new market made available on the FanDuel Sportsbook just yesterday, projecting the end of the college football campaign and the college football playoff in 2022. Welcome back to a Wednesday, live right here on The Morning After. I am Ben Stevens. He is Joe Raineri. And when Joe and I started working together all across the Sports Grid Network, it was on Saturday afternoons in the fall on a program called In Game Live, going around the Saturday slate in college football. Moments Joe and I had together last year, Oklahoma's comeback at the Cotton Bowl against Texas when Caleb Williams came into the game. We were there for history, JR. 9 overtimes between Penn State and Illinois in Happy Valley. So it looks great to me, and it brings me an incredible amount of joy to be able to preview a college football season with you here on The Morning After on this Wednesday. You ready to discuss some Make College Football Playoff odds?
Oof, let's do it, man. I'm excited. We love this. And don't forget, it slides right into college basketball. So welcome to the best time of year, folks. It is going to be epic, to say the least.
There is no doubt of that. Joe was out in Las Vegas this past weekend. He heard a lot of talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who opened things up in week 0. But, Joe, there are 29 teams that you can bet on, and with an actual price to make the college football playoff. Nebraska is not one of them. But as we know, 4 is a magic number in college football to make that CFP. And the 4 teams with the 4 best odds, to make the college football playoff are also the 4 teams with the 4 best odds to win a national championship. It should not be a surprise to see any of these teams up there. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. Alabama, the best odds on the board, minus 350 to make the college football playoff. Ohio State, minus 280. Georgia, minus 160. And Clemson at plus 125. So, Joe, 3 teams in minus money favored to make the CFP, and then Clemson rounds out the top 4. College football is chalk, as we often know. Do you think it will be this chalky to see this forecasted for in the CFP this season?
You know, the thing that was surprising to me and to a lot of folks I was talking to was how Georgia is being kind of ignored here. But I guess it kind of makes sense. Does it not, Ben, given the fact that the entire offense and defense is now in the NFL for the most part? I mean, my goodness. Absolutely unbelievable. But Georgia is, we know they can recruit. We know they're going to be ready to defend. You got Alabama, who lost in that title game, but brings back, Bryce Young and, this guy, Will Anderson Jr. You might have heard him. If you didn't, it's probably because he ran you over and you're looking for the license plate of the truck that just hit you. And Alabama, and you give Saban, $100 million until he's 120 years old? There's a reason for this here, Ben. Alabama, without a doubt, is going to be the team to beat. And Ohio State, C.J. Stroud, they are locked, loaded, ready to go. So it doesn't surprise me, the top 4. I did think maybe Georgia would have gotten a little bit more credit and love in the betting markets, but I'm not buying Clemson. I'll tell you that. Not convinced that Clemson is the team to beat. In fact, a lot of Miami to win the ACC money rolling in over the weekend.
And we will discuss the Canes here in just a moment. Here is what I will say about the historical perspective of the 8-year history of the college football playoff. There have been 32 available spots, of course, 4 each and every year for the 8-year history of the CFP. The 4 teams that have the 4 best prices, Joe, have made up 19 of the 32 spots in the history of the college football playoff. That is 59% of the available spots. So yes, college football is chalk, but you will see 2 teams in minus money hailing from the same conference, Alabama and Georgia. Bama, minus 350. Georgia, the reigning national champions, minus 160. Both those teams, the Tide and the Dogs, of course, in the college football playoff last year, in that national championship game against one another, with Georgia winning its first title in more than 4 decades. But that's only happened twice in the history of the college football playoff, that 2 teams from the same conference have made the final 4 spots in the CFP. It has been Alabama and Georgia both times out of the SEC, but it is rare based on history. So what does that allow us the opportunity for? Potentially some value. So let's go to the next 4 best prices, the expanded field of 8 if we ever get there in the college football playoff. USC, the 5th best odds to win a national championship, the 5th best price to make the college football playoff, plus 340. Oklahoma, plus 450. The Sooners not a member of the CFP last year, but have made 4 of the last 5. Michigan, plus 600. They were in the college football playoff last year. Utah opened in this market, Joe, at plus 750. There must be a lot of bettors out there like myself that think the Utes are going to win the Pac-12, get the Pac-12 back to the college football playoff for the first time in 6 years. And Utah, not USC, is going to be that team, because now Utah tied for the 7th best price alongside Michigan at 6-1. So, Joe, you don't believe in Clemson. We know the trends that say it's tough for 2 teams from the same league to make the CFP the same exact year. Where do you think value might be on the board to make the college football playoff?
Kind of hard not to look at the bottom there with Utah, isn't it, Ben? I mean, it's amazing how overlooked they are. It's while we've got USC, obviously, Lincoln Riley and company all gaining all the offseason highlights and all of the headlines. But let's be realistic here, Ben. Is there anybody Utah's not bringing back from that team from a year ago or so. That was quite good. They disciplined. They don't beat themselves. And I think Utah's going to. Well, I shouldn't say it's 6-1 surprise anybody, but I do think they're going to be overlooked in some of the bigger games this year, where the money's going to come pouring in on the big names. I'm not buying it. I think Utah not only may walk away with the Pac-12 title here, but might find themselves number 3 or 4 in the country when it's all said and done, Ben.
The Utes open up the year on the road in the Swamp in Gainesville against Florida. They have a very difficult schedule, but their win total is 8.5. The over has been juiced to -170. Now, it's a number that Utah has gone over in 6 of the last 7 full years of college football. The point should be made, though. The reason Oklahoma has been to 4 of the 8 college football playoffs in its history is because when you are a one-loss Power 5 conference champion, your path to the college football playoff is certainly there, as the CFP selection committee has shown us. Oklahoma right now, the betting favorites at +190 to win the Big 12. The Pac-12 has not sent a team to the CFP since 2016. 5 straight years of not appearing in the college football playoff. Now, Joe, Notre Dame has been to 2 of the 8 college football playoffs. In fact, 2 of the last 4. And the Fighting Irish, you have to scroll down the board to find their odds to make the CFP. 15-1 right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook. That's tied for the 15th best price in the entire country, but Notre Dame is a top 5 team in both preseason polls, the AP and the coaches, and has the 9th best price to win the actual national championship. Notre Dame is behind teams like Penn State, Miami, Texas, NC State, Wisconsin to make the college football playoff alongside the likes of Oregon and Tennessee. What do you do, Joe Raineri, with that Notre Dame dilemma?
You know, I don't think the drop-off from the coaching position is going to be as big as some people may think, as Brian Kelly takes his, skill set down a little further south to LSU here, Ben, where, I don't know, I do think the jury is still out on how well that's going to go. But listen, the one thing we know about Notre Dame is that there is not anybody on their week schedule. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? There is nobody on their schedule that is going to sleep and expect that maybe, just maybe, this is going to be a down year for Notre Dame. These kids will play. These kids will be ready to go. And whether or not they end up, undefeated, which I think, Ben, really is the litmus test as they head into late November, can they win enough meaningful games there to make it so the committee can't overlook them? It's going to be tough. I think they're at that price right now for a reason. But I do think there's going to be some opportunity. We know the public loves Notre Dame, right? We know the public's going to bet Notre Dame, whether they're good or not. But I do think they're going to be undervalued in some spots on that schedule this year.
Notre Dame, of course, an independent football program. It has not plagued them in the past, but we do know what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee values: conference championships. So you must correlate the markets, not just to a national title, but a conference championship. And Joe made this point earlier. Keep an eye on the likes of Miami. They have the 2nd best price to win the ACC at 5-1, 9-1 to make the college football playoff. If Utah wins the Pac-12 with only a single loss, they will make the college football playoff given their schedule. 6-1 their odds to make the CFP. Texas has the 2nd best price to win the Big 12. Oklahoma State tied for the 3rd best number at +550. That is Joe Raineri's alma mater, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, inches away from a conference championship and a CFP appearance last year. JR, as always, we appreciate your expertise in a variety of sports. We'll talk again soon. More The Morning After up next.
Might be the next daily fantasy millionaire. No matter what you watch or where you play, learn from the world's best DFS players. lineup building tools, expert projections, and advanced stats change the way you play the game. Dominate the competition. DailyRoto.com, the player's choice.
The morning after.
Who wins the American League Central?
I recently had a change of heart here, and it's the Cleveland Guardians. I think that the Guardians are going to win the American League Central. I think that what they do in terms of offensive depth, I know we talked about that with Houston a couple weeks ago. I think that Cleveland runs out an incredibly deep lineup. I also think that they run out a very solid front three in that rotation with Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, and Cal Quantrill.
The Sports Grid Network. Fantasy Sports Today.
Now at tight end, Mo Alley Cox Davis is one of those. I feel like over the course of 17 games, I'm going to be doing a show with you, or I'm going to watch a show somewhere else, and someone's going to tell him this is the week at DFS to play Mo Alley Cox.
I think the thorn in his side, though, is going to be the tight end that they drafted in the third round this year to kind of take up some of those Jack Doyle snaps, who is Jelani Woods.
The Sports Grid Network. The early line.
The team that's got a lot of people excited, Nebraska. The second best odds to win the Big Ten West. Donnie, last year this team won 3 football games. Only 1 win in Big Ten play.
But if you're looking like a team total guy like myself, even a win total guy, you're going to be looking at Nebraska saying something has to change, and maybe the quarterback change is what they needed.
Only on Sports Grid. Pharrell, Coast to Coast.
Do you believe he has the stones to fire both of them? His dad would have.
I don't. I think Boone is safe, no matter what happens. Maybe if they don't win the East, but that's almost impossible. So I think he's safe. Cashman's contract, I believe, is up after this year. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I would think he'd be in a lot more trouble than Boone would.
The Sports Grid Network.
Back right here on the morning after on Sports Grid and Sirius XM channel 159. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday. I am Ben Stevens. And for the past 2 months in the NBA, pretty much every story, every tidbit of news, all of the drama circulated around one man. His name, the easy money sniper, Kevin Durant. But yesterday, he is no longer wanting to be traded. He is back in Brooklyn. So to break it all down, the summer of drama that it was, and what the outlook looks like now for the Nets moving forward, Christian Arnold is back on the show here on the morning after. He has spent his summer mainly covering the Yankees and the Giants for AM New York, but also, I'm sure, keeping a bit of news going with the Kevin Durant circulation of stories as well. So, Christian, thank you for joining us here. A focus on the Brooklyn Nets right now.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate you having me on. There's always something to talk about the Nets, it seems like. Even in the dead of August, they find a way to put themselves back in the headlines. And, of course, Kevin Durant rescinding the trade request the other day, right smack dab in the middle of the Subway Series, might I add you, because why not? And a New York Liberty playoff run, too, if you add to it. Certainly jumping to the top of the headlines there. A significant move. Obviously, Brooklyn Net fans breathing a sigh of relief with Durant coming back now, and Kyrie Irving being here next season, Ben Simmons healthy, potentially healthy, I should say. Right now, it's at least things are looking positive for the Brooklyn Nets, which isn't something we could have said the last time I was on here when things looked much more doom and gloom for this team.
Christian Arnold, behind you right now, it is bright and sunny outside. Maybe it's that optimism for the Brooklyn Nets now with Kevin Durant back. But on Thursday, June 30th, when KD originally requested that trade from Brooklyn, it seemed like it was going to change the landscape of the NBA. We heard teams that were interested, the Suns, the Celtics, the Grizzlies, everybody offering these steep trade packages for Kevin Durant, but nothing really happened. Christian, throughout this summer, and when we got the news yesterday, did you ever actually think there was a realistic chance that Kevin Durant would play for the Nets this upcoming season?
I think it changed. It went from about 50-50 to about 60-40 that he wouldn't, and kind of teetered around there for me, because I think throughout the entire process, the one thing you kind of have to remember is the Nets really had all the control. As much as Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, to a certain extent, wanted to believe that they were running the show, that just wasn't the case. You look at the control that the team had. He's under contract for 4 years. Kevin Durant is a guy that loves to play basketball. That's above anything else. That's what he wants to do. So the Nets knew that. And I think even as these murmurs and rumors started to come out that maybe he consider sitting out, I think that was more of a strategic ploy by people closer to Durant than anything else to try and push the Nets into making some sort of deal. But I mean, this is kind of the best case scenario. And in fairness, too, Sean Marks and Joe Tsai, the ownership for the Brooklyn Nets, certainly ran a huge risk of almost potentially alienating two of the biggest superstars in this league, and really in the world, by taking this hardline stance with them, and it paid off. And like anything, you mentioned baseball, like anything, you make the right move, you make the wrong move at the right time. It could go either way. You either look like a genius, or you look like a fool. And luckily for Marks and Side, they look like geniuses right now, because they've convinced Kyrie to come back. They've put KD in a situation where, really, as substantial as some of these trade packages were, they were never going to accept them because they weren't what they were looking for. The Nets were looking for a king's ransom to get Kevin Durant to move him. And so these potential deals, while they looked really good, they just were never going to match the level of where Kevin Durant is and means to this organization. So I think that message was essentially conveyed in that meeting that they had in Los Angeles the other day, where they went to KD and they said, "Look, we're trying to move you, but we're just not getting what the deals that we want are, and we're not going to make a deal until we're ready and we get the package that we want." And I think KD kind of realized that it wasn't coming anytime soon.
Owner Joe Tsai, general manager Sean Marks, head coach Steve Nash, and of course Kevin Durant moving forward with their partnership. That a direct quote from the statement the Nets put out yesterday. So Christian, you saw what the market feels about the Brooklyn Nets. Their odds to win the East at the end of July, plus 700. After the news that Kevin Durant had rescinded that trade request, cut in half, plus 350. Their odds down by more than half to win an NBA championship, from 15-1 less than a month ago to now plus 700, the third best price in the entirety of the NBA. That's how the market feels about Brooklyn moving forward. How does Christian Arnold feel about the Nets and their outlook for 2022-23?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, this team looks like it should be right back there in the conversation with the Milwaukee Bucks, with the Philadelphia 76ers, with all these top-tier teams, because this is a group that when you have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and potentially a healthy Ben Simmons, and you don't know what you're going to get out of Ben Simmons. That's the biggest question right now going forward with the Brooklyn Nets, is what kind of player is Ben Simmons going to be? This is still a team that should contend for an NBA title. But at the same time, you have to remember, this is the same conversation I'm sure you've had with many other people going into the previous seasons once Durant started playing, once Kyrie got here. And this team has been more of a paper tiger than an actual threat for the last couple of years when everyone's on the court. Now, they've dealt with injuries and they've dealt with different situations, to say the least, that have prevented certain guys from being on the court. And right now, you don't have that going forward. But, to me, I have to consider them a contending team. This has to be a team that's taken seriously going into training camp as one that's going to be, a tough out in the playoffs, and one that should be contending for an NBA title. And I think we'll kind of get that first glimpse, because they do have a pretty tough schedule right out of the gate. I think they face Milwaukee right out of the gate to open the season. So, that'll be a real quick litmus test of where this team is and where this team is going. So right now, heading into training camp, I have to say, I kind of have to agree with the market here that this is a team that should be considered a contender for an NBA title.
The market has moved in a very positive manner for the Brooklyn Nets. Christian Arnold joins us here on the morning after from AM New York, breaking it all down after Kevin Durant takes away that trade request and is staying in Brooklyn for this upcoming season in 2022-23. So in the Eastern Conference, though, Christian, although the market has moved favorably for the Nets in a substantial manner, they still have the third best price behind the reigning Eastern Conference champions in the Boston Celtics and 2 years ago, the NBA champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. Both of those teams have knocked Brooklyn out and ended its season each of the past 2 years in the postseason. So how do you stack the Nets up against the other teams in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, it's certainly a great question because you look at some of these teams. I mean, the Celtics, they absolutely showed a superior class of basketball almost during that first round series last year against the Brooklyn Nets. And, that was a team that had Kevin Durant. That was a team that had Kyrie Irving out there. So that's probably the toughest team. And when you look at the challenge that they'll face, I think Boston has to be ranked up there with probably the biggest contender going against the Nets. You look at Milwaukee, and you can never count them out. That's an organization that has been so well run and developed its talent so well that they're going to be up there, and they're certainly going to be, like I said, they're playing the Nets early, and they're going to be a great litmus test to see where this team is. You look down the line, even the 76ers with James Harden staying there, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of motivation for him to play a lot better than he did in the playoffs too, after a bit of a disappointing effort there for him after such a big, hoopla that when he went from Brooklyn to Philadelphia. That's going to be a couple teams right there that are going to be in the mix, and they're going to challenge the Nets pretty hard this season. Even you look at a team like Cleveland, that could be a team that comes up and surprises a few people. They get the playoff experience by going out there and playing in the playing game against the Nets, and they played them somewhat hard. You can't take that away from the Cleveland Cavaliers. They played them quite well, and there were a couple of moments in some of those games where you're like, oh man, they could actually come out and beat the Nets here for a second or two. So there's a lot of good teams around the Nets going into the season that, yes, they are the favorite. They should be considered one of the favorites going into the season. But at the same time, there's so much talent around them, and teams that have a lot more of the cohesion and less of the drama, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that Sean Marks and Steve Nash are trying to get away from this season is the drama. And they talked about it so much at that May press conference that started this whole chaos for the summer, ironically enough. And so they're going to want to kind of get away from that, but that's going to be tough this season. These other teams around them, they don't have that. They don't have the kind of chaos going into the season like the Nets have had so far this year.
And so when you look at the Brooklyn Nets and the roster that Sean Marks has built and that Steve Nash will coach, we showed you that snazzy picture of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving back alongside Ben Simmons when healthy as well. You throw in a healthy Joe Harris and the rest of the cast and crew in Brooklyn. Christian, how do you think they all play together this upcoming season?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't think anyone has an answer because we haven't seen it yet. We know what Ben Simmons can do defensively when he's healthy, and what kind of playmaker he can be when he's healthy. And kind of what I alluded to earlier is that's the biggest question with all of this. What kind of Ben Simmons are you going to get going into the season? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be ready? Is he going to be mentally there? That really prevented all of those elements, prevented him from getting onto the court and being a factor in the playoffs or any point last season during that, second half chaos. And so that's going to be the biggest factor. We know what Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving can do. We've seen it before. These are two guys that have put up, 50 plus points when they're out in the court together. These guys are superstars for a reason. Joe Harris being back, that's a huge plus for the Nets, and having known what he can do and be that sharpshooter again. You have a guy like Patty Mills there who you won't have to rely on as much to fill that Joe Harris role, along with Seth Curry being back. You know what those guys can do, and the cohesion that they have, because even in the midst of some of the worst stretches for the Brooklyn Nets last season, those role guys really did put up a spectacular effort to try and keep the Nets afloat there. So the biggest question is going to be Ben Simmons and how he fits into all of this, because we know what the other guys can do together. We know what they can do successfully. Ben Simmons is going to be the key here.
And Christian, it wasn't just the odds for the Nets to win the East or to win an NBA championship that changed. Brooklyn's win total at the end of July was 45.5. Yesterday, after the KD news, shot up all the way to 52 and a hook. But This was the optimism last year as well. And we saw all of that drama play out in the regular season. The Brooklyn Nets needed to get out of the play-in tournament to play in the postseason. How do you expect things will be different this time around?
I mean, it's health. As long as these guys can stay healthy, and you're having Kyrie Irving out there for the full season, put that in quotes. Correct. And kind of interpret that how you will, considering his history. But, you're going to have Kyrie Irving out there for a majority of these games, hopefully. And that'll be the difference maker for sure, because you could tell the Nets were just, especially that first half of the season, they were so uncomfortable trying to figure out how to fill that void without Kyrie on the court. I mean, that was part of, I think, what led to some of James Harden's discomfort there, because he's just trying to do so many different roles that he wasn't accustomed to.
And when you look at that win total, again, 52.5, the market has moved in a positive way, but just 44 regular season wins last year, 48 the year before. Christian Arnold joining us here to break down everything in Brooklyn for the Nets moving forward. Christian Arnold covering all of New York sports for AM New York. Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this Wednesday morning.
Always happy to be here.
Very happy to have you here as well. The morning after rounds out this opening hour. Up next on the other side of the break, how do you feel about Brooklyn moving forward? Come back and join us.
If you want to pick like a pro, you need to be in the know. The future of sports gaming is now, and we take it inside the lines, breaking down all the action and what it means for your bet slip. Turn down the game and tune into Sports Grid Radio. Other networks talk sports talk, but we walk the walk, right up to the window. Sports Grid Radio.
Listen free on the Sports Grid Radio app, iHeart or TuneIn, or catch us on SiriusXM Sports Grid Channel 159.
Maurice Allen, 2015-2016 European Long Drive Tour Champion, 2017 World Number 1. Me personally, I keep my game face on me all the time. Especially coming out of the bunker, leaving the range, or even leaving the course. What's your story?
The morning after.
Why are you buying in on Dylan's stock for 2022?
Aaron Jones has been remarkably consistent for the Packers, and I kind of see him playing almost Alvin Kamara role in the slot, sitting about wide. And I think they're going to try and save him from taking this, ground and pound, and they're going to leave that role to A.J. Dillon to have this kind of more of a balanced approach because they need a little more consistency in their passing game. I think it helps that the Packers' offensive line is right now ranked 5th.
The Sports Grid Network. The early line.
Football is always so much fun because you see new players literally every single year, and the anticipation is stupendous once it gets underway. And we're really close to that. A 12:30 game overseas this weekend between Northwestern and Nebraska. And yeah, you're going to settle into Connecticut playing Utah State with a 27.5-point line. Everybody gets underway. Big Ten, Pac-12. We cannot wait for this.
Only on Sports Grid. Fantasy Sports Today.
The running back that appears to make the biggest jump maybe in the last 2 months, maybe in all of fantasy, honestly, Davis, is Dameon Pierce, who played for the University of Florida. And the beef that went on at Florida, Davis, is that people wanted to see him get the ball more. He really was never a primary running back at Florida. He's sort of a throwback guy in the sense that you give him the ball, he's never going to lose yards.
The Sports Grid Network. Pharrell, coast to coast.
This is yet, I'm told, at least the fourth different offense that Mayfield has to learn as a professional in his 5 years. And from the very start, Pharrell, they kind of knew it. I'm told after 2 weeks, he was so dominant over Darnold. It wasn't bad, but the fact of the matter is his timing was good. I'm told a couple of the throws are a little bit high. They feel that the time will be better as these guys work together.
The Sports Grid Network.
we round out hour number 1 of the Morning After Live right here on this Wednesday on Sports Grid and Sirius XM Channel 159, the home for Sports Grid Radio on Sirius XM, all across the Spiz Grizz network. That's Sports Grid. I am Ben Stevens. Thank you for joining us here on this Wednesday. Kevin Durant dominated the headlines on a Tuesday. He got rid of the trade request. He, general manager Sean Marks, owner Joe Tsai, head coach Steve Nash, and the Brooklyn Nets will move forward with their partnership focused on basketball and winning an NBA title for that Nets organization. But do you think that will actually happen, even with Kevin Durant back and Kyrie Irving in a Nets uniform as well? Throw in a healthy Ben Simmons, maybe Joe Harris dotting a couple threes from the perimeter as well. Is that team the NBA frontrunner? Let's find out what you think and Fade the Public. And that was the question we asked, focusing on the Eastern Conference. Now that Kevin Durant is back, where will the Brooklyn Nets finish in the Eastern Conference? At Sports Grid TV on Twitter for this active and ongoing poll. Will they finish in the top spot, second, third place, or fourth or below? And the public is fading the Brooklyn Nets. Not a backer of Brooklyn, even with KD back at the moment. 44.7% of the public saying the Nets will finish fourth or worse in the Eastern Conference standings. Well, that was the case last year, of course. Bounced in the opening round by the Boston Celtics in a 4-game sweep, despite the fact the Nets were the preseason betting favorites to not only win the Eastern Conference crown, but the NBA championship as well. This year, Brooklyn, the third best price in the East, tied for the third best price to win the NBA title at plus 700 alongside the Clippers and the Warriors out of the Western Conference. I think the skepticism is warranted as it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. Thank you for joining us in hour number 1, but don't go away. Hour 2 of the Morning After is up next here on Sports.